Number two, excellence doesn't just happen. There's so much today in the form of popular media, culture, sports, entertainment, where you almost get the impression that people who have achieved success wake up one day and, they're Bill Gates, or they're President Obama, or they're, someone said Britney Spears. I'm not sure I would put, but Britney, I'm sure worked hard. My point with that is, this is a lively class. You've done well.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Assistant principal. Excellence doesn't happen, and that's something that I learned here. I don't know, and there's many examples, there's many stories that I could draw upon. One of the best examples of that I learned was my freshman year. So as a freshman, which was a long time ago, I was a decent basketball player, probably because my dad was probably the toughest one-on-one opponent ever, and I was okay at basketball. I'm looking forward to playing basketball here at Gilbert. One of my very good friends, Tim Barber, whose mother, Mrs. Barber, taught here for many years. Tim was a runner, and he said, "Hey, Jamie, why don't you come out for cross country?" And I looked at it, I said, I had moved from New York the year before, and I said, what is cross country? I had not a clue, and I never run longer than a half mile. And I started the season. I made the team because they didn't have enough people to score, so they needed me. It's nice to be needed. And I was a horrible runner. I finished last almost every race when I finished. I had trouble, keeping my lunch down at certain times. Just an atrocious run. And as I finished up the season, Coach McManamy, who also taught here, and I think he's still here. I haven't seen him tonight. Is he still here? Mr. McManamy's here? Okay. Mr. McManamy, in a truly candid fashion, as I came, I said, Coach, what do I need to do? I've been here all season. I'm throwing up every race. I'm dying. Mr. McManamy said, Jamie, you need to run. You need to run something and practice. And it seemed like the most basic advice in the world. And I took it literally, though. And I ran. I ran all summer. I ran, to the basketball court. I ran to work. I ran down the steps in the morning. And as I started out the next season, that time that I invested paid off. I was a Berkshire League All-Star runner my sophomore year, my junior, and my senior year. And Coach McManamy will take all the credit for that. I know, and if he's here, he will. But my point with that is, it was the time that I spent in preparation and training which allowed me to achieve, a semblance of excellence there. And for all of you, whether you want to come back and teach, which is one of the highest honors anyone can attain in the world, whether you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, great parents, in any field, a business person, there aren't any shortcuts. And I would encourage everyone to remember a quote that I received as a freshman at West Point by one of my professors. He was the first African-American tenured professor and head of a department at West Point. His name was Colonel Andre Sales. What he told me was, as I was about to graduate and head out to the Army, he said, Jamie, when it comes to excellence, you've got to remember this expression. And I wrote it down. I've carried it with me since that day, which was over 50 years ago. He said, the enemy of excellence is good. Prioritize for excellence. The enemy of excellence is good. Prioritize for excellence. And what he was saying to me was what Mr. McManamy was saying. If you want to achieve excellence, good ain't going to get it. Good would have been me, hanging out during the summer and, maybe running once or twice. But you've got to prioritize for excellence, which to the class of 2010, I implore you, you've got to spend time on the things that matter. There's a lot of things you can spend time on, especially with Twitter, Facebook, MySpace. But what you want to do, and I know I was encouraged as I heard the class echo it, and I know Principal Hatch has ingrained it in you, which is great. You've got to start with the end in mind. And I'm here to tell you, you've got to start with the end in mind. And then you've got to figure out how you're going to spend your time. Because it's not going to happen by accident. It didn't happen by accident for me, and it won't happen by accident. You've got to spend that time. And remember, excellence doesn't happen. The third thing that I wanted to comment on is and this is something I believe you can take with you, and is perhaps, as a few of the speakers said, the most important thing. You're never too busy to help and to serve others. You're never too busy to help others. And as I think back to my time as a student at the Gilbert School, I think of so many people who helped me out. You know, I think of Miss Lang, who's here, and Miss Lang was my math teacher my junior year. While she said, and some of you had Miss Lang, I can tell. Miss Lang, while she did accuse me of sleeping in class this evening, she doesn't have me on video, but she says I slept in class one time. Miss Lang spent tireless hours with me and with other people in my class whenever we needed help with any, pre-calculus, which is tough, any advanced equations. She was always willing to give her time, and she's a busy woman. I think of Mrs. Corrigan, who's also here. Mrs. Corrigan was another teacher that would go above and beyond to spend their time and to help me and other students. I think of Coach Welcome, Coach Jim Welcome, who's here, who made me run a lot of suicides. You guys see the basketball team? Any basketball players in the audience? Okay. All right. I see you guys. You guys still run suicides? You guys still run suicides? All right, that's good to hear. No suicides. Mr. Welcome would make us run, but he was helping us get prepared and spending his time. And I have to just take a moment to thank one of perhaps the best examples that I found of service here, which was Mr. Gamari. Mr. Gamari, you can give it up for yourself. As a high school student, many of you, and I certainly, as a high school student, at times you just don't appreciate what people do for you while you're in high school. It takes you going out in the world and seeing not everyone is a Mr. Gamari or a Miss Lang, Miss Corrigan, or a Jim Welcome. Mr. Gamari and he's the busiest guy in the world. He was athletic director, he was teaching history, he had a family, he was training his son to be the best point guard Gilbert's ever had, Aaron. And Mr. Gamari would always take time to spend with me. I remember Mr. Gamari, I was new to Winsted, and I was playing basketball at Raleigh Park. And I remember Mr. Gamari driving by, passing me on the road, turning back around, and coming over and introducing himself to me. And giving me some shooting tips, by the way. Thank you for that, Mr. Mark. And he was never too busy to spend time. And what I found as a business leader today, and having been in the Army and an airborne ranger and going to Harvard Business School, and what I do today, more than anything, being an effective part of a team and being an effective leader means you're able to give of yourself. You're able to serve others. And you realize that it's not about you. It's not just about you. And it should never be. And that's something I learned at the Gilbert School. And I learned that from the examples that I've given. So now, first let me apologize to Mr. Browski because he said I had to be under 10 minutes, and I'm over. So Joe, I apologize. But in conclusion, and to summarize, please remember the following. To the class of 2010, the future is always uncertain, and there are some things that none of us can predict. It's okay to be a little bit anxious about that, and we all are at times. But never forget where you come from. Never forget what you stand for. Remember that the principles that will push you through any environment, integrity in your reputation, remembering that excellence never just happens, and remembering that you are never too busy to serve others. This has been such an honor for me to revisit where I came from and where I spent so many years in Winsted, in Connecticut, and at Gilbert. And I just want to extend a special thank you to the class of 2010 for allowing me to come back and address you, and to the staff and faculty for having me. I wish you the best. I'll be pulling for each of you. Good luck, and God bless. Thank you.